Okay, go for it.
All righty. Awesome. Well, hi everybody. Great to see you guys. And it looks like, let's see, is somebody back on the call? I'll just mute here real quick. Aaron, I muted you. Sorry about that. I was getting some background noise. Welcome everyone to the 13th meeting of our Energy Code Board. It's great to see you guys. Happy to be back. I'm just going to flag for everyone. I caught a little bug a couple days ago on my travels home, and so I've got my tea ready, but if I happen to just get struck by a attack of coughing or something, Allie's just going to swoop right in and take over. So, but today, really excited to dive into our public comment meeting. And so let's just go ahead and get started. We will start, I guess, before we review the agenda with approving the meeting minutes. And at this meeting, we need to approve both the meeting minutes from meeting 11, as well as the meeting minutes for meeting 12. And so I'll leave it to you guys if you guys want a motion to approve both at once or one at a time. But we'll start there.
I will say that I think the reason we had delayed the approval of the minutes was to allow Andrew to suggest some changes. I do not see Andrew on the call currently. So I don't know if everyone's okay with just going ahead and approving them without that anyway, but.
Clarification, did Andrew provide any additional changes to the prior minutes?
He did not.
Okay, then I'll move to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting, with just the note that we can incorporate any proposed edits from Andrew to past meetings at our sometime by our final meeting minutes. But I think as is, we can just adopt them.
This is Jason.
This is Kevin. Second. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I'll second that. Thanks, Kevin.
Great. Okay, thank you guys. And Carolyn, just to make sure I'm very clear, you're proposing we move to adopt both meeting 11 and meeting 12.
Correct. And then if there are changes that reflect back on those previous meeting minutes, we can read them into a future meeting.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you, Jason and Kevin, for the seconds. All in favor, please say aye.
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 And thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Chris. And anyone opposed, please say aye. Okay, meeting minutes are adopted as is, with a note that if Andrew has any suggested changes, we can review those at a future meeting. All righty, well, so the agenda for the day. We just approved the meeting minutes, so we're on to number 2. We're going to start today with our public comment session. And that public comment session will start as soon as I'm done talking and go until 12:35 today. At that point in time, we are going to give the board 10 minutes. And I apologize, it is only 10 minutes, but we're on a tight timeline here, as you guys know, to compile any and all thoughts and proposed code changes that you would like to discuss today with the board, based on the public comments that we received verbally today and the written public comments that we received as a board. We'll give you guys that 10 minutes. And yeah, Carolyn.
Can you define what you mean by compile? Are we just supposed to set the agenda for the 105 to 155? Is that what you mean, or?
I will kind of walk us through the schedule of events. We've got a couple of instructions for you guys on how we're going to move through from collecting your proposals to then reviewing and discussing them. So that'll be on the next slide. So we'll have you guys send us all of your proposed changes. And I'll, like I said, talk a little bit more about that in detail on the next slide. And then we'll give everybody a 5-minute break to take a break, get a drink, use the restroom, do whatever you need to do, reset a bit. And then in the second hour and some change of our meeting, we will be doing some final discussion and deliberation. So we'll start by wrapping up a couple of outstanding items from meeting number 12 that we need to make sure we've correctly vetted with the board. And then we will go through and review and discuss all of the suggested changes that came from today's public comment. And then we'll wrap up quickly at the end, hopefully trying to save as much time as possible for the discussion and deliberation and voting. Excuse me. So what that's going to look like, here's sort of the run of show for today. So we're going to listen to 15 different public comments from the folks that signed up to speak today. Each person will have 5 minutes to speak. They'll have a chance to ask any clarifying questions of the board, and then we'll move on to the next person. At any point in time during today's meeting, you guys can work on, if you hear a public comment and you would like to suggest a code language change, at any point in time during the meeting, you can start to work on what that change looks like, write it out, send it to our team. We will also have, as I mentioned, 10 minutes at the end of public comment that will be work alone time for the board. We will give you guys 10 minutes and ask that any changes that you would like to see to the code package, that you write out those proposals and you email them to our team. I hit send on an email right as this meeting started, so you guys should all have it in your inbox. That gives you guys instructions on how to submit those code changes to our team so that we can collect them and compile them into a Google Doc that we'll use to review and discuss and vote on those proposed changes. Now we recognize that, again, this is a really tight turnaround as opposed to what we're used to, right? We usually shared any proposed changes with you guys ahead of a meeting. You've had time to review them, to think about them, and then we've had time to ask questions before we vote. We don't have that luxury of time today. And so what we are going to be proposing a little later on is when you submit the code proposals, we're going to follow a very similar structure that we have in past meetings where whoever submitted the proposal will pitch why they would like to see that change. And then we'll have 2 to 3 minutes for discussion, asking questions of the board. And then we are going to ask for straw poll votes to include any of these proposed changes. We're going to have to kind of see how this goes. You know, well, like I said, it'll be a fast time turnaround. If the board doesn't feel like they have enough information to vote, we can kind of take those proposed changes on one at a time if there are unique circumstances. But that's sort of our general trajectory of the day. And then anything that we get approved by voting will make it into the final code package that we will share with you guys. And our goal is to get that out by the end of day tomorrow. So you have at least a full day to review before our final meeting on Friday. So I'm going to pause there because that's sort of a lot of information. Any questions? Okay. And we'll re-review the voting protocols and all that good stuff when we get there. But if I am not hearing any questions, and so with that, we're going to move on to the public comment section. And just for all of our attendees on the line, for those of you who will be speaking, if you have registered, you will have 5 minutes maximum to present your comment to the board. If you have any clarifying questions for the board, you're welcome to ask those. We just say that if you just want to note that if you give the floor away to the board to ask a question, your time will still be cut off at 5 minutes. That does not give you any extra time. And so just be thoughtful, those of you who are providing public comment, to make sure you've said your piece if you do have any questions that you'd want to ask the board. We will end our public comment session at 12:35, and at that point in time, no additional public comments will be heard. If there are folks on the call who wanted to give a public comment but did not register, if first we're going to get through the 15 folks who did register. If there's time at the end, we will call on any additional folks that have registered between now and then. But you must register following the instructions that Adam sent out if you would like to be considered to comment. So for all of those folks on the call, this is the order in which you guys will be commenting. So what I'm going to do is read out the name. Allie here is going to allow you to talk. I'm going to start the timer, which you'll see on my screen, and then we'll make sure we can hear you, and then I'll hit start and you'll have 5 minutes to share your thoughts with the board. So to get us started, we'll ask Ron Bennett. Allie, if you want to unmute him, and then Ron will just make sure we can hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Awesome. I'll start your timer now. Thanks, Ron.
Okay, thanks. My name is Ron Bennett. I'm an architect and also a volunteer with 350 Colorado. Thank you for this opportunity. I've been designing to comply with stretch energy code since 2010. My work with 350 Colorado has taught me that a significant portion of greenhouse gases attributed to buildings are from upstream fugitive methane and behind the meter leakage. I've since made a commitment, like many of my peers, to design only all-electric buildings capable of being powered entirely by renewable energy. I currently have 3 large projects undergoing planning review and 2 scheduled to start construction soon. One is a 127-unit apartment building that was Passive House Design certified in October. It'll be highly efficient with healthy indoor air and affordable utility bills for tenants. The rooftop solar array will pay for itself in 5 years. 25% of parking spaces will have EV chargers on day one, with the remaining 75% of spaces EV ready. Base building electrical loads will be monitored by an EV charging load management system that dynamically allocates remaining electric service capacity to all EV chargers. Let me assure you that all electric construction is feasible and affordable today. With that said, I have specific suggestions for the draft code. I recognize that there are very strong emotions associated with the Marshall Fire and the heartbreaking stories from those struggling to rebuild. This electric and solar ready code is not the same as Louisville's code with zero energy appendices. The purpose of House Bill 1362 is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. Let's not preempt solar and electric ready requirements, which are quite reasonable, intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because of a natural disaster that may likely have been made worse by the very climate impacts that we're trying to address. Section 102.2, substantial cost differential. Yes, 102 substantial cost differential is a poison pill for this code. Any commercial contractor can come up with cost estimates showing a 1% increase to MEP costs. Cost estimating is not a precision science, and 1% is well within typical cost contingencies. Instead of making it so easy to avoid compliance for commercial buildings, I suggest you consider some flexibility in the EV installed requirement for commercial buildings. Last year, I heard testimony on House Bill 1218, which the governor subsequently vetoed, that made a case for such flexibility. Commercial buildings with very large parking lots where guests are only there for a short time may be better off with, say, 1% of level 2 chargers instead of a hard and fast 2%. Finally, I urge you to please raise the EV installed and ready percentages for multifamily buildings from 5 to 10% of installed EV chargers and 15 to 25% for EV ready spaces. I believe this better reflects Colorado's goals and projections for EV adoption. It's only fair that renters have the same opportunities for at-home charging that single-family homeowners enjoy. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ron. Are there any clarifying questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Thank you so much, Ron, for your time and your energy today. We really appreciate you being here. Okay, Allie, thanks. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next commenter. So Mel, if you'd like to, Allie, if you can remove Ron and promote Mel, that'd be fantastic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Mel. Let me reset my timer and we'll go ahead and get started. Here you go.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name's Mel Yema. I'm the Town of Crested Buttes long-range planner, and I led the development of the town's above code requirements and adoption of an electric required code for new construction last year. I really want to thank you all for taking the time to serve as an energy code board member to develop a model building code that will serve all of Colorado. I strongly support the direction that the Energy Code Board has taken to adequately prepare new buildings and major retrofits for future electrification. This model code will be hugely beneficial for Colorado municipalities, as we had challenges with developing our above code provisions last year without a model code to look to. I would additionally like to suggest that you consider adding an all-electric appendix to the jurisdictional options. After we adopted our electric required code, we've been getting quite a few requests and interest from other jurisdictions interested in doing the same. Having an appendix would help provide model language for Colorado jurisdictions to look to and promote language consistency. It could also help position Colorado localities to access Inflation Reduction Act funding, as a large portion of the funding is anticipated to be reserved for states and cities reaching for more ambitious codes that exceed the zero energy provisions in the 2021 IECC. Thank you so much again for putting together this model code, your time serving on the board, and for your consideration of my comments. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mel. Any questions or comments from the board?
I just thank Mel for all of her hard work.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. All right. Thank you so much, Mel. We will move on to our next speaker, who will be Tessa Sanchez.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I'll go
Okay.
ahead and start the timer. Thanks so much.
Great. Hello, my name is Tessa Sanchez from Tesla. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the draft code package for Colorado's Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready code. We appreciate the work of this code board in developing these important codes. Tesla supports establishing solar readiness requirements, as well as several proposed code amendments regarding EV readiness for parking spaces in new construction. In our testimony today, we provide comments and recommend modifications to proposed code amendments within Chapter 5, the Electric Vehicle Ready Code. So in regards to Section CV 102.1.2, Tesla strongly supports the inclusion of code language that allows DC fast charging to be used in a 5-to-1 ratio for EV capable, EV ready, or EVSE installed in new commercial buildings. We think that this addition is important for providing building owners and EV charging providers optionality in providing charging levels that best suits the needs of the building and the drivers who park there. That said, we are concerned that as written, the language is not sufficiently clear that DC fast charging can be used in a 5-to-1 ratio, which could cause a patchwork of interpretations by building officials, charging providers, and building developers alike. Therefore, we recommend the inclusion of additional language to clarify that each DC fast charger EVSE installed space is permitted to substitute for up to 5 spaces of any type. In regard to table CV 502.1, Tesla supports the overall percentage of 60% EV power transfer infrastructure requirements spread across EVSE installed, EV ready, EV capable, and EV capable light spaces for R2 occupancies with greater than 10 parking spaces. However, we are concerned that allocating more than half of the overall percentage to EV capable and EV capable light spaces does not sufficiently address the needs of multifamily dwelling residents and could create barriers for those residents who need access to reliable charging solutions today or in the near future. EV capable make ready can require additional costly and time consuming electrical work, including running new electrical wiring and installing a dedicated circuit at the time the space is ready to be upgraded to an EV ready or an EVSE installed space. This could present a myriad of obstacles for a multifamily dwelling resident who may not be equipped to navigate the process. So we recommend allocating a certain portion of the EV capable and EV capable light percentages to the EVSE installed and EV ready categories. This would help avoid needlessly complicated and expensive future retrofits, reduce EV costs of EV charging for residents, and help accelerate the adoption of EVs. Thank you for the opportunity to submit these comments.
Thank you so much, Tessa. Any clarifying questions from the board? Okay. Hearing none. Thanks so much, Tessa, for your comment. We are going to move on to our next speaker, who is Ted. Lady? I'm sorry, Ted, if I butchered your last name.
No worries, everybody does. It's like
Awesome. Well, we can hear you, Ted, so I'll go ahead and start the timer.
Thank you. On behalf of the Colorado Association of Home Builders and the Home Builders Association of Metro Denver, we would like to thank you, the board, for your service and for committing your time and expertise to this process. Moreover, we thank you for allowing us to provide these comments on your draft codes, and we thank you in advance for your consideration. We are a 2,000 member organization across the state that represents 40,000 jobs, from custom home builders to large production builders, with an 11.5 billion annual contribution to the Colorado economy. More locally, in Denver, in 2021, that economic impact was 4.9 billion. And that does not reflect the income created for the allied fields, including architecture, legal services, appraisals, mortgages, real estate and title services, appliances, and furnishing. Overall considerations and concerns that we'd like to share today. We had Colorado Builders analyze the differences between the 2018 and 2021 IECCs, and their estimated cost difference was $11,450 per home for the 2021 IECC. The aforementioned Louisville codes that adopted the appendices for NZE, when they were factored in, that figure rose to $46,200 more per home. And I've got, in our written comments, you'll see some links to other studies and other scholarship involved beyond what the board has been shared already from the PNNL study. Steering us toward electrification too soon is not the answer, and may not be for some time. When public policy and code changes outpace technological feasibility, our economies of scale and customer demand, it typically results in greater cost, which creates another large impediment to building more attainable housing. Some of the arguments from proponents for the bill last year and for these codes contend that increased construction costs are mitigated by lower energy costs, but that's sometimes not borne out in national studies. The simple payback period in a climate zone 5, our predominant climate zone, most of Colorado, for complying with 2021 IECC ranges for 61 years. Studies show that homeowners only see value in features that increase cost if their payback period is 10 years or less, and the average home ownership duration is 6 to 8 years. Home Innovation Research Labs, the study that I keep referring to, did an analysis of the cost effectiveness of the 2021 IECC. The national average incremental construction cost for Climate Zone 5 is roughly $8,700. The average energy use cost savings for Climate Zone 5 is 6.3%. We respectfully request that the board pay more attention to their charge to taking into account housing affordability. We do not believe the board has met its charge to take into account housing affordability yet. Simply comparing upfront construction costs with the future cost to retrofit buildings to accommodate these systems, we believe falls short of that charge. While the cost of retrofit can certainly be more expensive than new construction, the changes being considered by the board will still contribute to increased construction costs, thereby making homes more expensive. For instance, one of the studies I keep referring to evaluated the cost to include certain electrification requirements, including EV circuits. The overall range of estimated electrification costs for an electric reference house compared to a baseline gas reference house is between $10,866 and $15,100 in a colder climate like Denver or Minneapolis. If you further factor in NHB's, or the National Association of Home Builders, 2023 priced out estimates, which indicate that for every $1,000 increase in the price of a median price new home, it will price out 1,305 Colorado households out of the market. It's also important to note that 1.9 million Colorado households already cannot afford the median price in Colorado. While we're talking about costs, we also need to talk about the 5 L's in residential construction. We can't just talk about these codes in a vacuum. We have to talk about land, or the availability of land, labor, the availability of labor, lumber, and other materials costs. I think we all understand what has happened in the capital space, or loans and mortgage interests, as well as laws and regulations. I'm only going to spend time on a couple of them, but as our national economist has stated, labor, lending, local regulatory restrictions, lots, and rising price of lumber and other materials are hampering new construction. We're already, and I can't see how much time I have left. I had to minimize my time. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. You have 30 seconds left, Ted. Thanks.
We're already shorthanded with our skilled labor and our trade partners, and it's expected to get worse. By 2025, we'll be expected to be 96,000 workers short. We do not believe the PNNL study the proponents use attempt to show that these codes won't increase costs takes into account that skilled worker shortage, the time it takes to train a construction workforce. If we remove the gas emitter from the equation, the increase on the demand on electricians will only further impact that skilled shortage. Lending is another issue becoming more acute by the day. We're at between 6 and 7% now. So for example, a $500,000 home in January 2022 at 3.22% interest rate amounted to a monthly payment of $2,800. 1 second, I got one more point. Now that the same new house is $532,000 at 6.09%, that monthly payment has grown to $3,874 or $1,000.56 more a month. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment, Ted. Okay, we are out of time for clarifying questions or comments from the board, but appreciate your time today, Ted. We're going to move on to the next commenter, Corey Gaines.
Kim, I'm not seeing him, but we do have a phone number.
Yeah, so Corey gave me the phone number that he would be using was 303-217-6788.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. All right, Corey, let us know when you're on, and we'll check and make sure we can hear you. Corey, you want to go ahead and try speaking? We see it in the meeting. I'm not getting any sound coming through, Corey, if you are speaking. And I see
Does
that.
anybody recall how you unmute the phone, what the code is? Is it *6 or *9?
I think it's *9.
*9. It looks like he may have dropped off. So let's skip Corey for now. We'll go to Elena, and then Corey, we'll come back to you afterwards so we don't lose time here. So we'll move to number 6, Elena Miller.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can. Starting the timer. Thanks, Elena.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Alana Miller, and I'm the Colorado Policy Director for Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today and for the opportunity to provide suggestions throughout the process. I am very supportive of the direction that the board is headed and believe that this proposed code will meet the needs of Colorado to reduce emissions, air pollution, and the cost to heat our homes and drive our cars. Based on my expertise, I will be speaking primarily to the EV readiness components of the code, and to save time, I'll focus on potential improvements, but please know that I'm broadly supportive of the other elements, so thank you. So I urge the board in its final days this week to consider the following tweaks. The first is about requirements for residential buildings with less than 10 spaces. The EV readiness requirements for residential buildings with smaller parking areas should be treated like multifamily rather than commercial buildings. As with larger residential buildings, the majority of residents will need to charge overnight. For instance, I live in an older building with 6 units and a shared lot. There's one EV readiness plug, like a dryer outlet for an EV in the lot, but it's not near my parking spot and it's not metered to my house. So when I bought an EV last summer, I had to hire an electrician to do work to install a charger. Requiring more readiness and more spots up front in those circumstances will benefit everyone. The governor and legislative leaders have also announced intentions to spur development of more affordable housing types, including 2 to 6 plexes. So we should anticipate that middle housing like this will become more prevalent, and we should ensure that these requirements align with the state's intention and forecasting. So I would recommend at least 50% of the spaces, ideally 60, like the other multifamily requirements, would have some level of EV readiness. The second issue is on waivers. We should be judicious in applying waivers. I think the board has crafted policies that are flexible and reasonable and necessary. So waivers should only be applied in limited circumstances. In particular, the substantial cost differential is defined as 1%. I ask the board to ensure that there are very strong protections, perhaps through third-party verification or other ways to ensure the intent of these rules are met, and there's not easy loopholes to be getting a lot of waivers. Additionally, in that section, I think there should be more clarification on what counts as a natural disaster. The third point is around universal spaces. The requirements for EV readiness should ensure that EVs are accessible to people who use wheelchairs, which could include requiring a percentage or at least one universal space. That's just a larger space that is accessible for somebody using a wheelchair to charge their vehicle. On fast charging, I'll echo what Tesla spoke to. I think the language on DCFC substitution could be clarified to ensure that each installed fast charger could substitute and not potentially just limiting to one by interpretation of the language. And then I'll echo a call for an all-electric appendix for the board to consider an all-electric optional appendix that would serve as a helpful guideline for local jurisdictions to pursue an all-electric construction code. So in summary, thank you, and excited to see the direction of this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elena. Any clarifying questions or comments from the board? Okay, not hearing any. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time today, Elena. We are going to now go back to Corey. Corey, hopefully your sound is figured out. We'll promote you and then we'll start the timer.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and start your 5 minutes
great.
now.
Okay, thank you for taking my comments again here. My name is Corey Gaines. I'm a resident of Logan County. I realize that no one on this board passed the law that created the board, but I would like to add a few things to the record. First, I would say that I question the representation that I and other everyday people have on this board. I question the amount of thought that the board has put into the added cost that the new code will place on everyday Coloradans such as myself. And excuse me, I say this for a few reasons. First, when I looked at the bios of the board members, I don't see a lot of people like myself, and I certainly don't see I didn't see anybody, if I recall right, from my part of Colorado. I wonder whether DOLA and or CEO realize that there are parts of Colorado east of I-25. Second, and I freely admit that I haven't heard every single bit of every single meeting, but the times I have, the people I hear over and over from the board speaking are those that I would characterize as committed environmentalists. That's fine. We're all welcome to our opinions. We're all welcome to see things differently. The concern I have about that, however, is that I think that the problem with committed environmentalists, at least from my perspective, is they don't often see other things other than the environment. There are a whole lot of things that go into having a house, living in a house, affording a house that do not fit with being committed to the environment in the way that I think environmentalists are. And third, I would like to point out the fact that it's my understanding trade unions were big supporters of this bill, and I know that there are a few members on the board who are from trade unions. Again, perfectly okay to be from a trade union, but the concern for trade unions is to make sure that their members get work and not necessarily that everyday people can afford a house. The last thing I'd like to mention is that I am surprised that this board took so long to take public comment. By my count, there were 13 meetings before anybody was allowed to speak, anyone from the public at all. 13 meetings. If the board's intent was to cement the impression that being unelected and unaccountable, they don't consider their effect of the decisions on the people of Colorado, waiting for 13 meetings was a good way to do it. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Corey. Any questions or comments from the board? Carolyn.
Yeah, just as clarification, Kim, can you confirm we've had the public comment form up since we started our meetings? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or
That was
comments?
not a question for me, I assume. I'm sorry.
No, Corey, I don't believe it was. It was a question for me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Any other clarifying questions or comments from the board? Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here, Corey. We really appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. So we will now go to Portia. Am I saying your name right, Portia? I'm so sorry if I'm not. Prescott?
I think it's Portia.
Portia, thank you. I'm adding new letters that aren't in there.
I don't see their name on there. Adam, was there a phone number submitted with that one as well?
I did not receive a number from Portia, so, and I think I saw her on the call earlier or as an attendee earlier, so maybe she'll rejoin, but
okay.
Yeah, we can skip over her and come back.
Okay. Portia, if you're hearing this and you are indeed that phone number, please just shoot Adam a quick email and let him know so we can make sure we can unmute you. The next one. So we'll move on to Jasmine Chu. And I probably butchered that one too. I apologize.
No, you didn't, Kim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
That was perfect pronunciation. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. All right. Your 5 minutes is starting now.
Thanks, Kim. Hello, Energy Code Board members. My name is Jasmine Chu, and I work for Rocky Mountain Institute, and I'm here to represent Colorado members of the America's All In Coalition, a national coalition made up of over 5,000 U.S. subnational actors. It includes everybody from hospitals to tribal groups, businesses to cities and counties who are all committed to climate action. There are 252 all-in members right here in Colorado too. And I first wanted to thank you all for your service on the Energy Code Board and your commitment to this responsibility of developing codes that will prepare all of Colorado's new buildings for future electrification. On behalf of the 13 America's All-In members who signed on to provide input, including a basin ski area in Boulder County, I wanted to point out that we're really pleased with many provisions in the draft code because they are climate aligned and enable an easier transition to electrification in homes and buildings. For example, we're grateful to see that you all voted to include a substitution ratio for buildings replacing up to 5 spaces of any type with a direct current fast charger. And also pleased with table CV 502.1 with the EV space percentage allocations, with Kevin's newly proposed 30% of commercial parking spaces that passed last week and the 60% coverage of multifamily spaces. But I also wanted to take this time to point out 3 areas of the draft code that we believe the board can improve to ensure a smoother transition to electrified buildings. 1 is the inclusion of an all-electric appendix. 2 is upgrading EV requirements for commercial spaces with 10 spaces or less. And 3 is demand response control language. First, an all-electric appendix should be included in the jurisdictional options to provide localities with official state guidance on how to incorporate all-electric construction in their jurisdictions. There are over 100 localities and 11 states across the country who have already required or encouraged building electrification. And we already just listened to Mel from Crested Butte. And the reasons for this are abundant. Number 1, they're cheaper to build because they don't have gas infrastructure connected. 2, it's cheaper to run on electricity with rising gas prices, which have recently been reported to be double from last year's heating season in Colorado. And 3rd, they bring about healthier living environments with no fossil fuel combustion in buildings. And this is especially important for people of color in Colorado who are exposed to 25% more outdoor PM 2.5 formed by residential gas combustion than white Coloradans. The second, so EV requirements should be 1 EV charger and 1 EV ready space in commercial parking areas with 10 spaces or less. On February 13th, the board voted to downgrade the requirements to 2 EV ready spaces. And the coalition members I referenced and myself, we would like to advocate for the board's original position. Having at least 1 EV charger in these types of parking areas will increase the public's accessibility to EV charging infrastructure. Also wanted to say that since the board voted to group all multifamily buildings under commercial buildings, it would be helpful to provide clarification if this requirement also includes multifamily buildings with 10 spaces or less. And if it does, then it would be even more critical that multifamily parking have at least 1 EVSC installed and 1 EV ready space. The Colorado EV equity study cited that an overwhelming majority of people charge at home. And 3rd, demand response controls should be included in the jurisdictional options section. This way, electrical systems such as heat pump water heaters, smart thermostats, and EV chargers can be enabled with greater grid interactivity. This type of technology can help to alleviate concerns about grid capacity and encourage load shift, which shifts usage to low demand times. When considering electrical charging, a report from NREL for the Colorado Public Utilities Commission discussed that well-designed time of use policies, as well as demand response programs, are two effective measures in managing a higher electrical load. Thank you for your time and giving me the opportunity to provide public comment on this code development. I appreciate your consideration of these three recommendations of the all-electric appendix, the upgraded EV requirements for commercial parking areas of 10 spaces or less, as well as demand response language. If you need more information, please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And we're right at 5 minutes, so we'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker. We really appreciate your time and being here today, Jasmine. Our next speaker is going to be, we'll circle back to Portia and just see if you were able to join. Adam or Allie, any updates?
I think
She was already on, and I think her name was she was using someone else's account. So I think it's Julie.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome.
Mute. Okay. Yeah, Julie is part of our team. So like we have the NAACP Zoom. So sorry about that. Confusion.
No worries.
Set this up for me. There's a bunch of these. So
no worries. We'll start your timer, your 5 minutes now. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And actually, I want to thank you, the board. Thank you for taking your time to actually take on this challenge of this energy code. I know you guys all have arduous schedules, so I do want to say thank you, and it's an honor to be here. My name is Portia Prescott, and I do want to stress that I'm a third generation Denver, Colorado native. My family were originally farmers out in the Brighton, Thornton area, and that's how we migrated to Colorado in the early 1920s. What I do want to say, I'm the president of the state conference for the Rocky Mountain NAACP, which encompasses Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming. So I say that I'm not just a president of one state, I'm the president of 3 states. And I'm also a board member for the Western Resource Advocates, and we encompass 9 states. So I may know some of you guys here, you may have seen me from that. But I'm also the president of our Environmental Justice Committee and a very big advocate for our green spaces, but also affordable green spaces. So we heard some interesting testimony, and again, thank you for your time. I'm basically here to bring a voice that is far too often left out of these discussions and neglected when it comes to environmental and city planning. I know the gentleman, Corey Gaines, talked about, he was concerned about the makeup of the board. I do have my own concerns about the makeup of the board. People of color are consistently exposed to higher levels of pollution. We face significantly greater public health issues and are exposed to a plethora of other environmental issues just by the nature of that's the way it goes. I'm from Colorado. And I'm tired of watching Colorado residents pick currently between paying medication, eating food, or paying for your heating, your electrical bill. And I'm tired of hearing my own family members ask me if the Xcel Energy prices will ever decrease from doubling this time last year. I mean, I have a great grandmother who I and my sister are supplementing with her because she's on a fixed income. She does have medication. She's in her 90s. She's walking around and can still drive her car. And thus she's having to choose between, if we don't help her with her energy bills, then she's not going to be able to get her medication. The time to take care of our residents, especially our low income families, is now. I understand we need new builds. I understand costs come with that. But at the same time, from our standpoint, we are for adding an all-electric appendix in order that communities have an educated and well thought out framework that promotes happier and healthier living. In the long run, building electrification infrastructure will generate less volatile energy bills compared to fossil fuels. Knowing that running on electrical lowers utility bills by $289 annually. And that climate is only going to become more extreme. Now that the climate is becoming more extreme, we must forward thinking to helping our citizens, especially energy burden and low income communities, afford these basic life necessities. In addition to this being a financial crisis, and I say a financial death and life crisis for low income families, we are seeing a public health crisis. On average, Coloradoans of color are exposed to 25% more outdoor PM 2.5 formed by residential gas combustion than whites. And you already heard this, but Black Coloradoans' exposure is 70% higher than whites. In Colorado, the all-electric appendix if adopted by localities, would move us away from burning fossil fuels in homes and toward cleaner, more efficient sources that heat our homes and do not contribute to hazardous air quality impacts that directly affect my community. We also stand by increasing EV readiness to 1 EV charger and 1 EV ready space in commercial parking areas with 10 spaces or less to support Coloradans on the road. With Denver having some of the worst air pollution in the nation, and not only just that, in the world, it is imperative that we provide the infrastructure needed to support electric vehicles. If there is not the infrastructure needed to support electric vehicles, it can de-incentivize driving and continue harm to our environment, our citizens, and our low-income communities that consistently have higher rates of asthma due to air pollution. Lastly, we promote the opportunity for demand response controls to help offloading peak energy. Knowing that Xcel charges 17 cents more kilowatt hours in the summer, peak hour usage and non-peak, between peak hour, non-peak hour usage, responsible use of energy can significantly help energy burden communities decrease their costs. Knowing that basically Xcel is a for-profit business, this is something that we have to seriously look at. Overall, we are here to advocate for the forward thinking that is necessary for protecting our citizens, our environment, and our low wealth communities that don't get a seat at this table, that don't have a seat at a lot of these tables, and that's why I'm here today. We must address this public health and financial crisis that our communities are facing now before it gets even worse. I want to thank you for your time, and I understand my sister's in real estate, my family's lineage is real estate, and I understand new build comes with costs, but either way it goes, this is being passed directly down to the lower wealth communities. However you slice it, dice it, lay it to the side, and we have to have those voices at this table. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all that you do. This is Portia Prescott.
Thank you so much, Portia, for your time and your energy, and thanks so much for being here today. Okay, we're at the 5 minutes, so we are going to continue on in our public comment list. So we'll ask Christine Brinker to share next.
Hi, Christine Brinker with Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. Man, it is tough to follow Portia. Thank you for taking the time to take on this challenge. I read every word. It is a very impressive amount of work. I want to make sure, like you guys, that it's workable, that it actually does enable easy electrification and make sure it meets required by law. So I have very specific suggestions in this place, 7 to be particular. Let me see how many I can get through. First of all, indoor fireplaces. You have these exempted, but these need to be included. For one thing, the law requires electric ready for heating, and indoor fireplaces are a source of heating. There are indoor electric fireplace inserts that are readily available on the market, and these will be necessary for homes that wish to go all electric in the future. It doesn't really seem like you need to include exterior fireplaces, but I do think interior fireplaces need to have electric ready in order to meet the law. Next, condensate drains. Heat pump water heaters also require a condensate drain. The draft only requires condensate drain for space heating combustion equipment, but you need to require it for water heating combustion equipment as well. Our heat pump water heater needed a condensate drain. And then along those lines, physical space. I'm concerned that builders and contractors who haven't installed a heat pump water heater before might be unaware that they're taller than a standard tank water heater. And I would like if you could call out the need for this additional height rather than just hoping they know, because this lack of space, even if it's a few inches too short, would add literally thousands to the cost of an otherwise simple swap in, swap out heat pump water heater retrofit. Next, electric ready for multifamily and small commercial greater than 10,000. That's CE 302.3.1. When I read through this, it didn't seem to include a receptacle or a junction box, but that is required by the law. So I think you need to add that in. And then once that's added in, it's not really clear what the actual differences are between greater than 10,000 square feet and smaller than 10,000 square feet, except that the bigger ones need some room for transformers, which you could add in a phrase. So for simplicity, you might affix that and just combine those sections into one. 3 more. The permanent certificate is listed as a jurisdictional option. I didn't get to hear your board's discussion on this matter, but I think that needs to be required, not as an option for jurisdictions. If you're looking out for the homeowner's interest, if they just have some piece of paper somewhere, that's not gonna stay around and get passed on to the next homeowner. If anyone else's file cabinets are like mine. So I think that should be moved out of jurisdictional options and just into the regular code. It's a certificate. It shouldn't add too much extra cost. Solar Ready parts 3 and 4. This one really stumped me. I read it over and over and over, and I couldn't see what the point was. All I can see is it says that you need dedicated space on your electrical window for future solar, even if your home or building is entirely unsuitable for solar or already has solar. I think you should delete the entirety of sections 3 and 4, or totally redo them if it doesn't say what you're trying to get at. And last, commercial buildings for EV ready. Commercial buildings except R2 with greater than 10 spaces. It currently goes 2%, 8%, 10%, 10%. And I would just like to suggest that you round it up to a nice pretty number and say 2%, 10%, 10%, 10%. So move the 8 up to a 10. I don't think that's too big of a deal, but it must be nice to have a nice round number there. So I guess that's a little less specific than all the others. 15 seconds for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Any questions or clarifying comments? Okay. Not hearing any. Christine, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and energy today. And we'll move along in our list. So up next, oh, sorry, timer, is Darlon Chang. And I just want to, Ali and Adam, make sure you noted that Darlon is on under a different name in the attendee list.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Starting your 5 minutes now. Thanks so much.
Great. Hello, my name is Darlon Chang, and I'm representing myself as an Arvada resident in the GEOS Net Zero neighborhood of 28 all-electric homes. I'm also a director of a startup company for building and retrofitting homes to be all electric and net zero. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of your work drafting the Colorado Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready Code based on my personal experience of living in a net zero neighborhood. I moved my family to a net zero home in the GEOS neighborhood more than 4 years ago. There were no fossil gas pipelines installed at the time because none of the GEOS homes had any gas appliances. My family's net zero home was similar in price to conventional fossil gas dependent homes in the area. Yet we've had no gas bills and minimal electricity bills because our home generates more power from solar PV panels than it uses. In the fall of 2021, CNN published a story of how exemplary the GEOS neighborhood is for net zero decarbonized building. On New Year's Eve in 2021, I found out that my friend and his family lost their home to the Marshall Fire. While competing with hundreds of other displaced families to find a temporary rental, they stayed at my home over New Year's weekend. I marveled at how comfortable my home was with a geothermal heat pump and a conditioning energy recovery ventilator that checks for unhealthy carbon dioxide levels in the house and brings in fresh air heated or cooled by outgoing air as needed. My friend and his family wanted their home to be rebuilt all electric like my home, and thanks to the building code of Louisville, their insurance company was required to pay for those upgrades in order to meet city code. While my friend was impressed by my all-electric home, many residents who lost their homes to the Marshall Fire were scared by disinformation from builders who do not want to adapt and compete under the net zero all-electric code adopted by the Louisville City Council a few months before the Marshall Fire. I know that the builder of my home was able to compete just fine building net zero. It's not just the uncompetitive builders, though. There's also a Colorado oil and gas industry front group called the Coloradans for Energy Access, which is formed by the fossil gas industry to fight the transition away from dependence on fossil fuels. I left a nearly 16-year research career at ExxonMobil because of my disgust with the lack of substantive action there, transition away from oil and fossil gas before they become unaffordable and trigger a runaway climate crisis. Fossil gas prices were held artificially low over the last decade by malinvestment in hydraulically fractured shale gas wells that are far inferior to conventional wells in production rates and lifetime. I worked on both kinds of wells, and my personal experience was that it took thousands of hydraulically fractured shale gas wells to equal the cumulative production of a single conventional gas well. This kind of malinvestment can only be profitable to the gas industry if future fossil gas prices are increased dramatically. Knowing this, the gas industry wants to trap as many new residents as they can into dependence on fossil gas infrastructure before they realize they could have saved thousands of dollars by never needing gas through all-electric homes. The original developer of my neighborhood planned to build more than 250 all-electric net zero homes. Only 28 have been built, and a new developer bought the land for the remaining homes because divorce proceedings forced the original developer to sell. After promising to continue building net zero homes in a press release in late 2020, the new developer went back on his word 6 months later when CNN was asking and installed fossil gas pipelines over protests by residents. I believe that the lack of an all-electric appendix in the Arvada City Code played a big part in why the new developer selected a conventional fossil gas dependent builder instead of the all-electric builders involved with the first 28 homes in my neighborhood. City codes like Louisville with an all-electric appendix give all-electric builders and startup companies like mine a chance to compete with intransigent builders who cynically spend money on disinformation and lobbying against much needed change, rather than on new supply chains and training to build homes that help residents save money and do their part in averting a runaway climate crisis. To conclude, my personal experience with an all-electric neighborhood and startup company is that energy codes are critical to the transition away from fossil gas in buildings, particularly with an all-electric appendix. Your work on energy codes is needed to counter disinformation campaigns funded by the oil and gas industry and supported by bad faith builders, as shown in the aftermath of the Marshall Fire. Your work is also needed to support Coloradans as they take action to meet science-based state legislated climate goals while providing their families healthier homes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darlan. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, not hearing any. Darlan, thanks so much for being here and for your time and energy today. Okay, next up we have Bill Lucas Brown.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, yeah, thanks so much, Bill. I'm starting your 5 minutes now.
Thank you. I get to follow all these greenies. And I guess I'm a little bit of a greenie myself. I actually installed the ERV at Darlan's home. And unlike Christine following Portia and how difficult that was, I feel like it's difficult following Christine. And I'm really appreciative of all the details she looked into. And for you all, it's tough balancing jobs, economy, the environment. I've been on the Golden Sustainability Board until just recently, and trying to balance all these things. And I feel what you guys are going through. But I'm actually calling, again, my name is Bill Lucas Brown. I'm one of the co-founders at a startup called Helio Home. And we're a home electrification company. And we're trying to help crack the nut on retrofits. New homes we find are actually quite easy. And so my comments today are going to be focused just basically on one point. And that is that all heat pumps are not created equal. And I don't know, because I haven't read through everything in detail, if you have a heat pump requirements and if they're based like Excel Energies on SEER, EAR, HSPF numbers. But we're finding in our business, and I've been building homes in the hippy dippy straw bale homes in the San Luis Valley 30 years ago, and all the way to now, and retrofitting thousands of homes. Contractors right now are still very much relying on hybrid systems when we talk about heat pumps that rely on a gas system backup, and that allows them to, one, meet the requirements because the requirements are too loose, but also because the heat pumps are they don't have to be sized properly necessarily. And so any contractor can install a hybrid system with a backup gas system. And then the question becomes, how much of this system is going to ultimately rely on fossil fuel that produces CO2? And we know that CO2 and methane associated, methane and the CO2 associated, it's a poison, and we all know that. So unfortunately, that's just kind of the standard in the industry right now, and it's really hard to find companies that are knowledgeable about true electric heat pumps and cold climate heat pumps. We have retrofit thousands of homes. We do everything from solar heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, insulation, EVs, obviously panel upgrades, since we are doing retrofits. We've retrofit thousands or hundreds of homes with Helio in particular, old ones, new homes, solid brick homes, wood homes, large, small, all with zero backup. My 1904 home in downtown Golden with zero insulation is more comfortable and is completely electric. And this argument about it's too expensive or it doesn't work is just, it's not true. There is a place for backup heat. You know, if I've got loads that are 70,000 BTUs, I got to have some sort of backup. But we haven't found a single new home that's under 5,000 square feet that can't be heated on electric heat pump high efficiency systems only. There are certainly older homes where we do have heat loads that exceed our 50,000 BTUs that we can get out of the Mitsubishi equipment that we install. And for those, we can install a hybrid system and let the clients choose. But to allow for non-cold climate heat pumps and to not close that loophole, it's really to tether our future to a path where we all know where it's going to lead to more trouble. There's no special training. There's no special installation. If we just stick to install requiring heat loads, matching that load, that's going to go a long way to getting us in the right direction. I appreciate this. Last thing I want to say is the technology is here. The cost is here right now. And some of the other folks talk about, hey, it's too expensive. Well, what's a reasonable cost for health? What's a reasonable cost in the future for not acting today? The systems we install today are going to be with us for 30 years at least. That's 2053 if my math is right. If we don't do this now, when are we going to do it? The all-electric appendix is a no-brainer, especially after working with Golden Sustainability Council. We could have used that. I think many people can. Let people choose what they want to do as far as jurisdictions are concerned. And, this, just to reinforce from a contractor's perspective, it is not difficult to go all electric from a cost perspective or otherwise. And if y'all have any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer any, but thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Bill. And we don't have time for questions, but Bill, if you're the board you're welcome to follow up with Bill offline if you guys have any further questions for him. Really appreciate your time and energy today, Bill. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Song-Hee Han. And hopefully I said that name correctly as well.
You almost got it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
My name is and I'll mute myself.
Perfect. Good afternoon. My name is Song-Hee Han, and I'm a member of Physicians for Social Responsibility in Colorado. I'm a medical student at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, although today I do not speak on the behalf of the university. Thank you for taking the time to develop a code that would serve all of Colorado. So we strongly support the direction that the board has taken to prepare new buildings and major retrofits for future electrification. So before starting med school, I worked at an allergy clinic in a children's hospital and had first-handed experience working with many pediatric patients coming in with allergy and asthma exacerbated by allergens and other irritants in the air. And as part of the next generation of healthcare providers, I am concerned about environmental health equity issues and therefore supportive of adding an all-electric appendix to the jurisdictional jurisdictional options. There are several health benefits of building all electric buildings in Colorado. So I'm going to address respiratory health, pediatric health, and also health equity. So most of us probably know that fossil fuel appliances and buildings emit lung-damaging nitrogen oxide pollution, which leads to formation of ozone or smog. Furnaces, water heaters, and stoves in Colorado emit over 6,500 tons of nitrogen oxide pollution per year, which is over 4 times more than all of our state's gas-fired power plants. Not only do gas stoves emit nitrogen oxide, they also leak nitrogen dioxide and methane. Studies have shown that the higher the nitrogen dioxide level, the more severe the asthma symptoms in children and adults. Methane gas poisoning can result in lasting cardiovascular, respiratory, and neurological problems. Moving on to children. Children are especially sensitive to environmental toxicants and associated adverse health outcomes due to their weak immune system and immature lung development. There are many studies on this, but one shows that children living in a home with a gas stove have a 42% increased risk of experiencing asthma symptoms. And last but not least, health inequity issues. So building pollution disproportionately harms Coloradans of color, which was addressed earlier today. On average, to repeat, Coloradans of color are exposed to 25% more pollutants formed by residential gas combustion than whites. Black Coloradans' exposure is 70% higher than whites. The health inequity related to indoor air pollution extends to pediatrics as well. A 2020 study showed that non-Hispanic Blacks were almost 3 times more likely to die from asthma-related causes than the non-Hispanic white population. Non-Hispanic Black children had a death rate 7.6 times that of non-Hispanic white children. The all-electric appendix is crucial in alleviating the growing health burdens on people of color. The all-electric appendix, if adopted by localities, would move us away from burning fossil fuels in homes and towards cleaner, more efficient sources that heat our homes and do not contribute to hazardous air quality impacts. To close, an estimated $635 million in health impacts annually can be attributed to burning fossil fuels in homes in Colorado. The health of Coloradan families, especially children, should not come with such a hefty price tag. The all-electric appendix is crucial in improving and implementing healthy buildings for healthy Coloradans. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and appreciate the time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Song-Hee. We really appreciate your time and energy. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Thanks so much, Song-Hee, again. We will move on to our next speaker, who is Ross.
We don't see Ross in the attendee list. So if you, Ross, are the phone number and able to email Adam, we would appreciate that.
Okay, thanks, Allie. So Ross, we'll skip over you for now. Please let us know if you are on the call, and we'll move along to Courtney Anderson.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Starting your 5 minutes now. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Anderson with the City and County of Denver in the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. I was very involved in the 2022 Denver Energy Code, as I see some of you on the board are as well. But I'd like to provide some feedback based on lessons learned from our robust code committee process, which included stakeholders, subject matter experts, and our community. Our code committees work to achieve a balance between being ambitious and achievable. I also sent some of these comments in a form this morning since there's a lot of detail here. So again, thank you for your time and interest in taking the necessary steps to progress all of Colorado to align with addressing climate change. Denver has partial electrification requirements for space and water heating in commercial buildings, and we highly incentivize electrification in the residential code. So we would very much support an all-electric appendix to this code. There's numerous benefits to electrification, especially in addressing equity that many fellow public commenters addressed already. So I'm going to jump into the specifics of the draft language today. The first portion is going to be about Chapter 3, Electric Ready. So in Part 1, Residential Electric Ready, and Part 2, Commercial Electric Ready, in RE 302.1 and CE 302.1, additional electric infrastructure exception for interior and exterior fireplaces and fire pits. I looked through the House bill and I didn't see any language for this requirement. So I'm curious as to know why we would exempt interior fireplaces from being electric ready when these fireplaces still use gas that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, and they would still have indoor air quality concerns. I'm not asking the board to consider removing gas fireplaces. I'm recommending that we at least set these fireplaces up to be electric ready for the future. The next comment is in RE 302.2-3 and in commercial CE 302.2. It says where combustion equipment is used for space and water heating, dedicated physical space shall be provided for future electric equipment. To me, dedicated physical space is too vague, and I believe Christine mentioned that as well. I would like to recommend having minimum dimensions for water heaters to ensure there's a space for future heat pump water heaters, not just for less efficient electric resistance water heaters. In the 2022 Denver Energy Code, we have requirements for water heaters being located in spaces that are 3 feet by 3 feet by 7 feet high. We also have minimum volume requirements. But there's also exceptions that the space can be reduced if the team provides a cut sheet that shows the equipment can work in a smaller space. So there is flexibility provided there. Next point is in RE 302.5 and CE 302.2, adjacency for electric ready. I see there's having receptacle or J boxes within 3 feet of combustion equipment. That seems like a very long distance. There's even for space and water heating, it says 6 feet, which just feels like too much space from that existing equipment. In Denver, we have 12 inches, so the J box is close to where it needs to be. 6 feet feels like it doesn't even need to be in the same mechanical room, and I didn't see any language that actually made it need to be in that mechanical room. Next comment is CE 302.3.1, combustion equipment or appliances. To Christine's point too, I don't see a receptacle or J box requirement for commercial buildings, 10,000 square feet or greater. Large commercial buildings can still benefit from this and avoid costly retrofits later on. This conversation came up in Denver about how do we know what will be installed in the future for replacing large gas water heaters that don't have a clear electric equivalency now. So we provided exceptions for equipment if over 300,000 BTU per hour. It's a missed opportunity to exclude large commercial buildings from providing these J boxes for all of their combustion equipment and appliances. And in my last 44 seconds on EV ready, in table CV 502.1 for EV quantities, it has a very different structure from what the Denver Energy Code has. The board is split by parking space quantity more than occupancy type. I would suggest to review this by occupancy type more, since different occupancies are used in various ways. Occupancies like S2 parking garages would benefit more from EVSE installed spaces or other building types. And I'd also encourage a higher percentage of EVSE installed space requirements, which can maybe lower those EV ready or capable spaces to keep up with demand. I'm out of time, but thank you all very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Courtney, for your time and energy today. And we are out of time for any board questions, comments. So we're going to move on and we're going to go back to Ross Seymour. Allie or Adam, have you guys heard from Ross, or Ross, are you under a different name, perhaps as an attendee?
I've not heard anything from Ross.
Okay. Ross, Adam's email is in the answered Q&A box. And so if you are on the call, please shoot him an email letting him know what your Zoom name is right now, or if you're calling in via phone number. Otherwise, we will move on to Tyler Carlson.
Kim, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. starting
Awesome.
your 5 minutes. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
thank you very much. Appreciate the time. Tyler Carlson, managing partner at Evergreen Development, and I'm here representing the International Council of Shopping Centers and NAOP, the Office Industrial Properties Association. I'm on the government relations chairs or boards for both. I'm coming from a development background and experience. My company was actually one of the first to build under the new Denver EV charging code. So that's my comments daily, mostly directed towards that, and testified last year at the legislature on the prior EV bills, and have a handful of just really implementation concerns that I would hope that the board would consider. One is that the EV ready category, I strongly recommend you guys remove the wiring requirement for it. And what you're talking about doing is installing unconnected wiring all over the state of Colorado in, I think right now, 10% or 8% of the commercial parking spaces. And that is a construction theft nightmare waiting to happen. The additional cost of the wiring is not the issue, but it's the theft risk. And as soon as the construction crime rings find out that this is being installed all over the place in every parking lot, it's just going to get stolen, because copper is one of the easiest things to steal. And if it's just in conduit sitting in a parking lot unconnected, it will be removed very quickly. So as I mentioned at the legislature, conduit is good practice, and I don't think we have an issue with the conduiting of up to, frankly, 30% of the spaces, because that is where the main expense is conduit is ripping up old parking lots and installing conduit retroactively is cost prohibitive. So we encourage that, but I think we need to be very thoughtful about the application of the actual installed chargers in a commercial situation. Level 2 chargers don't work, especially in a retail context where people are there for 5 to 30 minutes. They aren't used, and requiring their installation is frankly short-sighted, just because of the nature of the charging times that are required. In our routes project at 56th and Tower, we were required by Denver to install level 2 chargers all around the parking lot for each one of the buildings, and they're not used at all. But what is used are the level 3 chargers that we did install with a EV charging company, where they put a bank of them behind one of the buildings, and those are used very regularly. The challenge is it's a 10x difference in cost when you factor in the cost of both the charger and the electrical equipment upgrade. So the other thing I'd recommend is that in the substitution in CV 102.1.2, instead of a 5-to-1 substitution, it really economically should be a 10-to-1 substitution. Because in a commercial situation, what you really want to do is encourage the installation of fast chargers, because that's what consumers use. That's what they frankly need in a commercial context. And I think that will get more of the equipment in the ground than that the market actually wants. Different story in residential, obviously, but in a commercial context, the fast chargers are much more utilized. And again, I would also recommend you looking at the 2% of spaces requirement. I think 1% is probably a better number, especially when you look at large parking fields. I know one of the issues that Denver has run into is in the larger anchor retail context, the just raw number of chargers you're talking about. When Costco was going through its approval process with the city out in Green Valley Ranch, the power required to install the full electrical requirement was going to be enough to power like 2,500 homes. And Xcel Energy had zero capability to supply the electrical needs to actually deliver on the EV charging requirements under the city. And so they had to go through a pretty painful variance process as a result, because it just did not make practical sense in a large parking lot. So I'd be happy to talk to the board and outside of this, because we've got a lot of experience with the implementation of EV. We're fully behind it. We think it's where the market's going and it should be done. But again, the focus should be on conduit, no wiring, unless it's going to be actually plugged in and to reduce the total number of actual and chargers from 2 to 1% with that 10 to 1 conversion, not 5 to 1.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tyler, for your comment and for being here with us today. We don't have any time for board questions or comments, but really appreciate your time and energy. So we're going to give one more shot to Ross Seymour. Ross, if you have joined the meeting, if you're on the meeting, Allie, Adam, any updates from your side of things?
Nope.
Okay. Ross, so we're not seeing you on the meeting. If you are here, please email us to let us know. Otherwise, we are going to use the next 10 minutes to allow for folks who were not able to register ahead of time to speak. And so the order that I have is going to start with RJ Harrington. We'll move to Velma Campbell following RJ. So RJ, we will give you your 5 minutes.
Thanks, Kim. RJ Harrington with National Car Charging. Nice to see you in 2 dimensions since we last saw each other in 3 dimensions here at the city of Louisville. I have specific comments. Tyler touched on a lot of them. Thanks a lot, Tyler. Those were great focus comments. Mostly, I want to speak to the increased cost for retrofits. In National Car Charging's experience, doing over 8,000 chargers across the country, we are finding up to 60% increased costs when it comes to retrofits. So planning for the future is very important. And I'll echo a lot of what Tessa said as well from a DC fast chargers perspective, but Tyler really nailed it. It's really that 10 to 1 ratio that is best. Courtney also touched on more of the use case and utilization, which Tyler echoed to a certain degree. It's all about dwell time. How long is that vehicle staying to charge? In a residential, multifamily aspect, it can be all night. Also, we'll echo that wire comment that Tyler made. We do see theft. And more around the installed EVSE. We particularly in the industry are shifting away from electric vehicle supply equipment connotation to electric vehicle charging infrastructure so that we capture what the utilities also have to integrate and or a little bit more CapEx on the front end for commercial application. As most of you are aware, there are now technologies that allow for significant on-site generation and or storage and controls to really help the utilities at that grid edge with distributed energy resources. And also want to shout out Mel from the beginning. We've done some projects together up there in Crested Butte. And as a former resident of Crested Butte back in the 90s, I am so excited at how far my former town has come. But because I am quite busy integrating electric vehicle charging infrastructure around the country, I will send regrets to the board for not being able to participate more fully during the process since October. I cannot cite chapter and verse because as a business owner, a business participant, we just don't have the time, right, to participate in these processes. So deeply appreciate those that have had the time and to you, my fellow humans, that have committed to serving on the board. So finally, as a human, I want to comment more philosophically. As a resident of Louisville and as a survivor of the Marshall Fire, thankfully, most of us humans survived, but as most of you are well aware, a lot of property did not. Our home did survive. We had very minimal damage, a little bit of infiltration of some of the toxins that combusted because we long ago integrated on-site solar generation rooftop. We charge now all electric vehicles in the Harrington household. That will be 3 of them, predominantly using that solar generation. We have upgraded our windows and our insulation. And the unintended benefits is after the Marshall Fire, I saw huge chunks of char on our solar array. The difference between char and soot is that soot is when a tree or something that Mother Nature produced combusted. Char is when everything we made combusted. And so the unintended benefits of covering our roof mostly with solar was that the char landed on the array and could not combust the array as it might have otherwise combusted our rooftop shingles. So when we look through the lens of costs, and we hear a lot about front-end costs and CapEx, my comment earlier, retrofit costs are much higher. But what particularly Portia touched on, and also Sung-hee, those non-integrated, those external costs, the Marshall Fire costs, can we specifically point to that event specifically being caused by the combustion of additional methane? No, we cannot. But those costs that have not been internalized must be considered. Otherwise, our species, sorry, time's up. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, board.
And thank you, RJ, so much for being here, for your time and your energy today. So we have time for another public comment. So we're going to move now to Velma Campbell. Velma, if I see you on there, if you want to try unmuting.
How's that? Did it work this time?
There it is. I gotcha.
Oh, good. The internet's been glitchy this morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to offer public comment in this very important forward-looking process. My name is Velma Campbell. I'm an MD with a master's in public health and environmental health sciences and occupational health. I'm a member of Physicians for Social Responsibility and a number of other public health oriented organizations. I appreciate all the work that has gone into this code draft, especially the provisions for new buildings and significant retrofits in preparation for electrification and EV needs. I'm speaking in strong support for an all-electric appendix to the code. I will try and not duplicate too much of what's already been said. Adoption of clear, strong public building codes, requiring preparation for electrification makes sense for the public health of Coloradans, as well as for the safety and economic benefits. As a public health advocate for many years, it is very frustrating to hear from some commenters that old, tired, false dichotomy that forward-looking change must necessitate sacrificing jobs and economy. That simply has not been proven to be the case over time. Health impacts of fossil fuel use in Colorado affect individuals across our state, as has been described excuse me, by previous speakers. There is the increased rate of asthma in children who live in homes using gas for cooking, increased indoor pollution, and the contribution of buildings to air pollution in our communities. It is well known, as has been stated, that people of color and or low income are subjected to more particulate and hazardous air pollutants, and that race is in fact a factor independent of economic status in those disproportionate impacts. These communities have higher burdens of chronic disease and often less economic capacity to make the retrofits required to make up for short-sighted policies of the past. By establishing a level playing field for builders and contractors, building codes requiring preparation for all electric structures bring equity to the process, while excessively liberal waivers can give advantages to businesses taking a more short-sighted path and leaving owners and tenants holding the bag for climate pollution and other costs. In contrast, the role of building codes as a part of moving forward in Colorado and our communities is fundamental. One specific I noticed that I want to mention, and it has been mentioned previously, is a waiver for indoor fireplaces and similar equipment, as well as more limited requirements for other combustion equipment. The indoor air pollution risk and the lack of a reason not to make it easier for building users to install electric equipment when ready to do so warrants strong limitation, if not elimination, of waivers for those type of equipment. I will say from my experience in medical practice that even though they are maybe intended for recreational use, fireplaces and other types of combustion equipment often are used by residents to supplement their heating, and they should not have to sacrifice their health in order to do so. I appreciate, as I said, the opportunity to speak to this code and hope that we will see strong codes coming out of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Velma. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have one for all commenters on theft and what you see as best practices to avoid theft. We had some people say that ready was the problem, other people saying that installed could still be stolen. How do you avoid that?
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, and so looks like we have time for one more comment that we'll aim to squeeze in here. And so Anita Seitz, I definitely didn't get that one right, I don't think. We'll take you as our final commenter today.
Thank you, and you did get it right. It's Seitz.
Awesome. Your 5 minutes is starting now. Thanks, Anita.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anita Seitz, and I'm the Advocacy Director for Colorado Communities for Climate Action, or CC4CA. I'm also a former member of the Westminster City Council. CC4CA is a coalition of 42 local governments that have come together to work for stronger state and federal climate policies. Our members are cities and counties from across the state. We represent Front Range, Western Slope, mountain, urban, suburban, and rural communities. Collectively, our members represent over 1.5 million Coloradans, roughly a quarter of the state's population. I think the size and diversity of our membership represents the scale and enormity of vulnerabilities local governments realize in the face of climate change. In every region of our state, local governments are threatened by climate change. Fires, flood, and extended heat waves threaten infrastructure, public and private property, public health, and the Colorado way of life. I want to note that we're not an environmental coalition. We're a local government coalition. Our members care deeply about their local economies, housing, accessibility, and affordability, and equity. They work to support the interest of all members of their communities. And of course, our members also value local control and authority, but we understand there are issues of statewide concern and that having a state baseline can support their goals and needs. As an organization, we supported last year's House Bill 1362. We know the critical importance of future-proofing the built environment by creating a state energy code floor. I want to take a moment to thank each of you for your work. Creating policies and solutions that work statewide is difficult. We appreciate the hard work each of you brought to the development of the solar ready, EV ready, and electric ready state codes. We're very supportive of the direction of the board's work. And while others today have given you very specific technical tweaks, my comments are more general. I would like to focus on your recommendations regarding EV ready codes for multifamily housing. The transition to electric vehicles is an important step in combating climate change, promoting equitable access to electric vehicles, protecting health, and saving Colorado residents money. Making sure that all members of our community are able to make this transition is important. Residents that live in multifamily are in peril of being left behind because access to charging infrastructure is particularly difficult. We know that the overwhelming number of people charge their EVs at home. We appreciate that your model code contemplates 60% of parking in multifamily will have some level of EV capability, ranging from charging to EV capable light. We'd like to see a higher percentage of these spaces as EV SE or EV ready. We also would like to see a high percentage of EV parking preparedness for multifamily and commercial buildings with 10 parking spaces or fewer. We believe there should be at least one EV charger in these spaces. We want to ensure that our state policies prevent the establishment of future EV deserts. We also appreciate the residential electric ready codes. Allowing consumers the ability to switch to electric appliances without the expensive burden of upgrading their wiring and load allows residents to realize the benefits of electrification, which include not being bound to the unstable prices of natural gas, which saves them money, and avoiding the negative public health consequences of indoor cooking with natural gas stoves. We share the desire of other commentators today to include an all-electric appendix. On a personal note, I am a mom of 3. I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old. They worry about the future we're leaving them. Climate doom for kids is real and oppressive. They feel that we, the adults, haven't taken steps to protect their future. I'm excited to talk to them about your work, to talk about the collaborative and thoughtful manner in which you approached these recommendations, the amount of consideration you gave to the fact that we're a diverse state, and that these recommendations must realize that reality, but we also have to act affirmatively with their future in mind. I think your recommendations will give them hope. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Anita. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay. Carolyn, okay. All right. Well, Anita, thank you so much for your time and energy and for being here today. And with that, we will wrap up our public comment period. So thanks to all of you who participated, and for those of you who spoke, again, we can't emphasize enough how much we appreciate your guys' input. And so now we're going to move along into the sort of next section of our agenda. So starting at 12:40, we are going to give the board 10 minutes to please write down and send to the Lotus team your proposed changes to the code. I recognize in many of our public comments today, we heard a couple of suggestions to add new chunks of code language. And so in recognition that you might not be able to develop all of that in the next 10 minutes, please do your best to summarize your thoughts and what you would like to see included. We'll ask that I sent you all an email at the start of this meeting. If you reply all to that email, that would be the most helpful so that all of our Lotus team can receive your guys' feedback, and then we'll pull that into a live working doc that we will work through in the later half of the meeting. Adam.
I would just note too that some of our presenters today also submitted written comments along in the public comment document that Ali linked in the chat. So some of the language, if you are interested, I believe like there was language for the all electric appendix and perhaps other things as well that some of our commenters had provided. So if you are interested in one of those proposals, I think there also may be some language you can find in the comments that will help you.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, so with that, we'll give you guys 10 minutes. At 12:50, we'll hope to have all of your emails back in our inboxes, and then we'll move to a 5-minute break. So I'll be calling that out loud, but I'll let you guys get to work, and just shoot me an email if you think you'll be sending something later than the 10 minutes so we can track that. Thank you all. Hello, board members. Oh, hold on, there's a weird echo. Give me one moment. Okay, that should be great. That should be better. So if at all possible, please wrap up your comments and make sure to hit send on that email, reply all. We're gonna start our 5-minute break. So just make sure you take time between now and 12:55 to use the restroom, get a drink, take a bit of a brain break, look at a tree for a minute, and we'll call you guys back in about 5 minutes. Okay, thank you guys for your patience. We're just making sure we pull in all your comments. So I'll just take one more minute and then we'll call you guys back to restart the discussion. Okay, everybody. I am going to ask that you guys start to make your way back to your computers. Let me know you've got there by raising your hand or turning on your video so I can see your face. And okay, thank you all. I'm seeing most folks are here. All righty, so thank you all for dealing with us in that very short timeline and for submitting all of the thoughts that you guys had. Our Lotus team is hard at work pulling all of those comments into a Google Doc that we'll look at together. And before we get to discussing the public comments, there are a couple of outstanding items that we wanted to flush out with the board that were leftovers from the last meeting. Zach, do you have a question? I see your hand up.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, so first we'll go through just a quick reminder on discussion straw polling process. While we are going to allow more time for discussion today, and I encourage the board to use it, especially when it comes to topics we haven't discussed yet, we just want to make the board aware that we have an hour left for these final discussion pieces. So we're going to start by wrapping up the meeting 12 outstanding items. We're going to move to discussing all of the items that we heard via public comment. And then a couple of board members submitted proposed changes that fell outside of the scope of what we heard from public comments. So if there's time today, we can cover those proposed changes, but we will focus our energy and discussion and time today on discussing changes that were a result of public comment. So we will have a similar format as we had in the past, where we'll ask each board member to present their proposal. We'll give you guys 30 seconds. We ask that you be quick. And then we'll have the board members discuss for 2 to 3 minutes. We did receive quite a few similar proposals on similar sections of the code. And so when that happened, we'll allow each board member to share their thoughts on the specific section that we're discussing. And then we'll ensue the discussion. We will do a continuation of the straw poll process that we have for the last several meetings. We will need at least a minimum of 11 votes in order to pass a proposed change. So with that, we're going to move along to a couple of the wrap-up items we have for meeting from the last meeting. And I will just ask that Adam or Allie, if there's any, or any board member, if I'm missing any context when I share any of this information back, since I missed the last 2 meetings, please just jump in and correct me at any time. So the board voted to strike the word supplemental from the definition of future electric equipment. And so that vote was approved by the board, but we did not bring this definition of future electric equipment back to the board for for a vote of approval. And so that's what we would like to do today, just to make sure that the board is comfortable with the way that this is written. And Carolyn.
Yeah, I'm realizing that we effectively combined supplemental and future electric equipment into one. And so I think this should read equipment necessary to support future all electric space and water heating, or something different than this, because it just speaks to supporting the future space and water heating and equipment. And I want to make sure we're not also using future electric equipment to also mean the substitution for the combustion appliance. So I just think that there's a problem with that elimination of the supplemental. We can incorporate it here. Future all electric space, water heating, and other appliances, including supplemental equipment as applicable, to make it more complete, or something else. But I just wanted to, I think we just combined two things and didn't quite combine it.
Thanks, Carolyn. Adam, any thoughts?
I'm wondering if we could just add the two words "or supplement" after support or supplement, so that we're making sure we're not, I agree with Carolyn, like we want to make sure we're not just talking about the combustion equipment, because that was not the intent here. But just to make sure that we're also keeping it like such open-ended, like we're talking about specific equipment that is necessary to supplement those combustion equipment or combustion appliances.
And then Adam, I think we would replace all the space and water heating and just put all electric space. I think all electric appliances or
I
equipment.
think we would just say, yeah, I'll just get rid of space and water heating, and just say all electric equipment or appliances.
Okay, so thank you, Carolyn and Adam and Elizabeth. Yeah, any other thoughts?
Yeah, it seems like we're using the term in the definition. So I'm not sure this really makes sense. If future electric equipment is defined as equipment necessary to support or supplement future all electric equipment. Do you see what I'm saying? We're using the term in the definition.
I do see what you were saying.
Delete the space and water heating words.
Also, maybe then we could just list everything that we are touching, because I think there's kind of that list of 4 things: space heating, water heating, cooking, and clothes drying. Those are the 4 things that are in the statute, right, that I think we're touching. So maybe we just, instead of getting rid of space and water heating, we just list everything. Would that be better, Elizabeth?
I think that probably meets the intent. Like I get what you're going at, but we've now just defined the thing by just re-saying the thing, and I don't think that actually makes any sense.
No, I think
Agreed.
You're totally right. It's so frustrating when we go to the dictionary and the term basically is just used in the definition. So.
Right.
Okay, so I think if I heard correctly, this is what the suggestion was, to unstrike the text space and water heating and add cooking or clothes drying equipment or appliances. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I was just trying to go through the ordinance or the code language and trying to quickly see where the term future electric equipment is being used. I just found a couple, but just to kind of see if that is going to still align with how that definition works in the different sections. That's why this would be kind of nice to have a day or two to look at, but I know we don't. So maybe somebody could just say, it's right here in all these spaces. Thank you.
I believe, and I have the draft pulled up, we could do just a quick find search in the draft, that this comes into play when we're talking about the electric ready, especially for physical space and any exterior like electrical infrastructure. Andrew?
Could you do the same thing for the use of the term supplement? Is still existing, or was it struck in its entirety in every instance? Because I thought it was.
Let me check.
It should have been struck everywhere, Andrew.
I see no, I did a quick find search, Andrew, and there's no supplemental or supplement reference within the code.
So what purpose does it do here? It confuses or complicates. Is not support sufficient?
I will look to the board. Carolyn, do you want to respond to Andrew?
Yeah, I think the intent is to make clear that it's inclusive of any supplemental needs as applicable, not necessarily to require the inclusion of supplemental. So I think it's important to call that out just to make sure it's clear that, and I think we heard public comment earlier today about, the options exist. There are homes that can be fully heated without any supplemental backup, or there are homes where there needs to be additional or businesses where there has to be supplement, and we would leave it to the design team to determine which is appropriate for that. But we just want to make sure that it's inclusive of that supplement as it's applicable. So I think that was the intent of including it. And then to Tim's point, I was doing a quick search. The one thing I noticed is that we always add the or appliances after future electric equipment. So we always say future electric equipment or appliances. And so I think we've got, we've now included appliances in the term of future electric equipment. I don't think that's bad. I just wanted to note that that's what I found when I did the search on future electric equipment in the current draft.
And Andrew, just briefly then, how is not what you just described not already encompassed in the phrase support? Any equipment necessary to support future. Now, putting supplement means to augment, add more, and that's a whole different topic that I thought we went away from.
Yeah, I agree that it could be inclusive in support. I would then propose equipment necessary for or to supplement would be a way to get rid of one of those two.
Thanks, Carolyn. Don, you've had your hand raised for a minute. I just wanted to say, Carolyn, to your point of I'm looking through the code, and in some cases we say future electric equipment or appliances, and in others we don't use that appliances. So just to note, there's a little bit of an inconsistency there. But Don, over to you.
Yeah, I think the term supplements, we're just leaving it for misinterpretation in the future. Support covers what we need to do. Supplement can be easily confused to put more than what's required. So I don't think we need to add this. We've struck it in the other cases. I think this just mucks up the works.
Okay, thank you, Don. So we'll go to Tom, and then Tim, and then Adam.
Yeah, I think support is plenty broad enough, and it just kind of muddies the water, adding an additional modifier.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Tim or Tom? Now to Tim.
Same exact statements. I don't think we need it in there.
All right, and Adam.
I was just going to ask building officials to say how they would interpret that. So if they interpret that, if a building official would interpret that to mean support means to cover any equipment that might be associated with electric equipment as well, then I'm fine with leaving it at just support.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Carolyn?
I think with that change, we need to delete the words equipment or appliances from the end and say equipment or appliances necessary to support future all electric space and water heating, cooking, and clothes drying.
Okay, let me just get my little formatting done here. This would turn red. Okay. We'll let everyone read that for a moment. Any further thoughts, comments on where this has landed? Any final suggestions from the board? Ron, and then Andrew.
I was just gonna say, I think this works.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Over to you, Andrew.
I think it actually undoes it, that the equipment was ancillary or secondary, even though that's not stated, that the equipment or appliances are the space and water heating, cooking, or clothes drying. Those are the equipment or appliances. I'm not sure what supporting appliances would be necessary for the appliances.
So are you suggesting, Andrew, that we strike
I'm
or
suggesting that
appliances here?
we would strike that and leave equipment or appliances the way it was. That's my interpretation.
So no, in the use of future electric equipment, we mean it to include the heat pump water heater, the heat pump for space heating, the dryer. So that's how it's used in future cases, because it's used in the context of physical space and circuitry that's required. And so it's not just the support equipment, it's also the actual equipment that's being supported that has to be inclusive in this definition.
But is that not the equipment or appliance specifically listed? The space and water heating, cooking, or clothes drying? Those are the appliances, are they not? So I'm not sure what appliances would be necessary to support the appliances.
No, so they're not supporting the appliances anymore. It's the equipment or appliances necessary to support future all electric space and water heating, cooking, or clothes drying.
Or drying. Okay.
Period. Yep.
So those, you believe that to be the appliances then, and that's the correct listing. So I'll go along with it.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Okay, Andrew, I was just going to make that change to show. I think we're getting into a bit of semantics. I don't know. I think both ways that you guys are thinking about structuring it, to me, says pretty similar things. So, Andrew, are you comfortable?
Yes.
With this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So, any other thoughts on this proposed change? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a vote. So if folks can please raise your hands if you would like to adopt the proposed change in the table that we see here. Awesome, fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Keep your hands up. So we have 18, now 19 participants who voted in support of this. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. And if you do not support changing the definition as written on the slide, please raise your hand.
Sorry, late hand.
That's okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay. Am I missing? I don't think I see a hand raised unless I'm missing one. So I think that's no votes against. Awesome. Wonderful. So this is the change that we will make to the general definitions. Thank you all for workshopping that with us. The next thing that we needed to iron out from the last meeting, as you guys will recall, there was a vote to change the language under Chapter 1, 101.3 intent, and the board voted in majority to accept Rob's change. And so what we didn't do at the last meeting was host a final vote between Rob's change and the original language. And so that's what we need to do to make sure that the board feels comfortable moving forward with which option they feel comfortable moving forward with. So both options are on the slide. We will vote for the options one at a time. So I'll give you guys a moment to reread through both of this, refamiliarize yourself, and then we'll go into brief discussion if you guys have any comments. Okay, I'm hoping you guys have had some time to read. I'm going to go to Andrew for the first comment. Oh, Andrew, you lowered your hand, so I'm going to guess you don't have a comment. Oh, you did have it. Okay, yeah, go for it, Andrew.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'd still object to both in this instance, and that may not matter, but I adamantly disagree with, other than stating what is verbatim in the act itself, because I think that is the intent, and to not include home affordability, I think sidesteps the intent of the statute. So in voting, I wouldn't be voting for either in this. I'd abstain.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew, and I appreciate you bringing that up. We'll offer other board members to abstain as well. Carolyn?
Yeah, and I think I had originally proposed the striking of or solar thermal.
I believe that's correct. And Adam, again, I wasn't at the meeting, but I believe that of the options presented, Rob's received the majority of votes, which is why it's the option on the table.
I think just we voted on them separately. So we voted on the removing of solar thermal, Carolyn. If I recall correctly, it's just that it did not receive 11 votes to remove it. So that's the thing, is amendments were required to have 11 votes, which is a true simple majority of the board. And if it didn't get 11 votes to remove it, then it stayed in, which was the problem with the intent language generally, was that with this cost effectiveness, the board had very clearly voted that it didn't like the original. And we had voted between the alternatives, but we hadn't voted between the winning alternative and the original. So that's why we're doing this again. But everything else was reflective of the fact that any changes that got 11 votes were changed. Anything that didn't was not.
Yeah, so to the degree that we want to consider it, I would just offer the striking of solar thermal again here as an addition to Rob's. Again, we aren't actually future proofing for solar thermal. We were just simply recognizing that in the case of a solar ready zone, solar thermal could be installed in its place, which is different. And so I think we should just be consistent with that.
Also,
I won't fall on my sword for it either, though, but just offering that up.
I'll just remind folks too that this language we're seeing here from Rob and the intent language that was up here in 101.3 is actually not the language that was adopted, the 101.3, because we hadn't finished this section. So like Rob's change was made to what the original draft was. So like we had already agreed to change like future proof, and so there are other things in here that are changed already. So it's not one of them, though, I will point out.
Should I then pull in the correct language? I apologize. I didn't realize that was.
Yeah, I think for the top section here, let's pull in the language from the actual draft.
Okay, apologies to the board. I missed that. Okay. All right, I'm going to pull in this language and then get a little bigger so you guys can read that. Okay.
So yeah, that's what it actually said at the end of our last meeting.
Yeah, and I'm fine not belaboring this one if you want to just vote too.
Okay, just making sure that what we're voting on is actually. Okay, I think that's correct. Okay. Any other comments or thoughts on this before we vote? Hearing none, seeing no hands. So what we'll do is vote between option 1, option 2, and then we'll also allow folks to abstain from voting. So option 1 will be to keep the original text as is included right here in this box. To vote for option 2 will be to vote to approve the proposed change from Rob, and then abstaining from the vote we will do finally. Tim, any final comments?
Well, just a question for clarification. If you vote to abstain from voting, I guess, I'm sorry, if you abstain from voting, so you don't vote, then how does that all play out with a majority, or does it go back to the original language or what was modified? I'm a little confused as to what the result would be if there were quite a few board members that abstained.
That's a very fair question, Tim. I think the rule of thumb that we've been following is if, well, actually, Adam, that's a good question. If we have 11 members abstain, would that remove entirely the intent section? I don't know that that's the vote.
No. So when it comes to amending language, usually if the amendment doesn't pass, the original language stays. Abstentions are not a vote to remove things. So if folks abstain, then that will take votes away from either for or against. But if for does not get 11 votes, then the language stays as it was. I mean, that's how amending language works, is if you don't vote, if you don't approve the amendment, then the original language stays.
Thank you, Adam. So those who would like to abstain would just simply be making a statement that they are not in support of either, but it would not impact this being removed from the code itself.
So the net result would be if the new one in red, that Rob's proposal does not pass, then the standing language would be what's in the top box. Is that correct?
Correct.
At least until we go to the final vote on Friday.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Okay. So we will again vote just to keep things very crystal clear. If you would like to keep
I think Mo has a question.
Oh, sorry, Mo. See your hand.
Sorry, Kim. You were so close. After we have this vote, can we revisit Carolyn's suggestion as well? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what I would encourage if folks want to make a change to the proposed change or to the original, that we flush that out now and then we vote, we vote on those options.
Okay.
So Mo, if you're interested in accepting that proposed change from Carolyn, maybe we can have a bit more discussion, and I'm happy to strike that.
I will just note for everybody that anytime we spend revisiting votes we already had takes away from talking about things that people are proposing through email, because this meeting ends at 2, whether or not we get through all of those, unless everybody decides they can stay longer. But that's the consequence of revisiting votes that we've already had.
Thanks, Adam. So we're going to move forward with a vote here. So if you would like to keep 101.3 intent as originally drafted, please raise your hand now. Okay, thank you all. Okay. Zach, just making sure. Okay, so we've got four votes total for keeping it as originally drafted. Thank you, guys. If you would like to accept Rob's proposed change for 101.3, please raise your hand now. Excuse me. Okay, thank you, everyone. So that is 13 votes to accept Rob's change. So we will move forward with the Rob's proposed change here. Kevin? Oh, sorry. You're probably just lingering from the vote. Mo?
And we need to allow for folks to abstain too.
I was just gonna say, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, guys, keeping me on my toes here. Okay, and then all who would like to abstain from voting, please raise your hand now. Okay, I see 4 votes to abstain. Thank you all for your vote. So with the 13 votes for keeping Rob's proposed change, that wins the majority, and so we'll move forward with Rob's proposed change. Thank you all. Okay, so the next big flag, and this is a big one, and this was also brought up in today in public comment by a couple of folks today. We, in reviewing the voted on changes to CE 302.3, which is the electric ready requirements for commercial buildings greater than 10,000 square feet, wanted to flag for the board that with the change that was accepted, we are doing a couple of things that that sort of go against the original intent in the discussions that we had with the board. And they also go against what the sort of the state statute requirements have stated, although we know as a board, we have the ability to determine what's adequate or not. So with the changes that were made, we've removed entirely the junction box requirement. So now there is no junction box required. The other, I think, slightly more impactful thing that was done is that the number 2 here, a dedicated appropriately phased branch circuit is wiring. So you would have a pre-wiring for all large commercial buildings. Within the discussion we had as a board in the previous electric ready meetings, I believe there was sentiment from the board that we did not want to include wiring, but only wanted to include conduit. And so that sort of was raised as a flag that we wanted to just make sure. From my understanding, this vote happened at the very end of the meeting last time. And so we just wanted to make sure that the board, revisited this if they wanted. So Carolyn, and then Tom, I'll go to you. I think that was your suggested change.
Yeah, I think the intent was to make sure that there was panel space for a dedicated appropriately phased branch circuit to accommodate future, as opposed to the actual branch circuit.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Tom?
Yeah, this was my recommendation, and I was digging through some cobwebs, and I misread your blue writing originally. I am not intending to add the requirement of conductor. So I withdraw that. I think I copied it over unintentionally, but my comment to change the formatting to more closely reflect the previous section still stands. But I agree, conduit and no wiring, as long as the legislation allows that.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for that clarification. So, I'm just going to copy this over so I can workshop this a little bit with you guys without messing with the original. So it sounds like we do not want to, the intent was not to require wiring. And so Carolyn, you suggested that there be a word space added here.
So before, at the beginning of the sentence, space for a dedicated appropriately phased branch circuit size to accommodate. Yep. Or you can say panel space to be more correct. Because we have the physical space in the next one. Yep.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, other thoughts, Kristen?
I'm reading the legislation and it specifies electrical wire.
So as you guys might recall back from our discussions on electric ready, there is a word within the state statute, and I can go find that slide if I need to, that says the board must determine adequate wire, adequate panel capacity, adequate space. I think there's a couple raceway, adequate raceway. And so I believe we were interpreting that word adequate to apply to all of those. And so if the board determined that wiring was not adequate in certain circumstances, it would not be needed, or the board would have the authority to not include it. Similarly with the raceway, similarly with all of the rest of the of those pieces in that electric ready requirement.
It further specifies electrical receptacles. I mean, I just think this is really broad.
Thanks, Kristen. So I'm wondering, because there were a few public comments related to this one in particular, would it be more helpful for the board if we tabled this until we get to that section where the public comments come into play, and then we can look at that all together? Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two questions here. One is, do we require, are we intending to place the same requirements on commercial buildings to have wired receptacles or not? I believe this language is appropriate if we end up on the not side. So we could pass it under that assumption and then revisit the other decision, which is are we going to require wired receptacles for large commercial?
Okay. So to be clear, you're suggesting we could vote on that,
or you can table it. I'm fine either way. I'm just saying that I think that just to bucket it, if we end up with not requiring separate receptacles, I think we're now in the appropriate place as far as language. If we change that overarching decision, this whole thing would go out and we'd have to try again.
Right. Okay. Well, I think in that case, then, since that question number 2 isn't answered yet, perhaps we move over to public comment and we can flip back to this as we go. So, okay, the way that we are hoping to run this public comment, and so we'll get through as much of this as we possibly can. So we are going to, and can you guys see the Google Doc that I have up?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each amendment at a time, section by section, allow folks to share their proposal, and then we'll ask for a straw poll. There are 9 pages worth of proposed amendments. So we will get, as I said, as far through this as we can. If we don't have time to get through all of it, we'll need to figure out a secondary option to wrap up this discussion. So the first suggested change was from Kristen. And so Kristen, I'll ask you to share your suggested change. And again, I trust you guys to keep it brief, but I'm going to do the 30-second timer for sharing, and then we'll have a few minutes to discuss, and then we will be voting. So Kristen, over to you.
Yeah, so I want to make sure the other Energy Code Board members who may not have been aware of this are aware of this. The legislation says that EV Ready has a receptacle. We modified the definition of EV Ready to say a receptacle or junction box. You cannot plug in to a junction box. And my concern is that in some applications, let's say an apartment building has EV ready spaces, but they don't actually install a place to plug in, people are gonna not be able to plug in. So I would propose that we match the EV ready definition to the legislative definition, which says receptacle. And then if you need to add a definition for receptacle, that includes that hardwired other equipment that we modified this to accommodate. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. Any comments, thoughts, questions from the board on Kristen's suggested change?
I guess I just have a question. So my recollection is that I think, Carolyn, you were the one who proposed adding or junction box, and we had a discussion about whether or not that was even legally allowed. And the decision was to move forward with vote how you feel on it. And then, you know, when we have a final legal review of the code, if it needs to come out for violating the statute, then we will remove it then. But so I feel like this is maybe just rehashing the debate about whether or not to include junction boxes when
it's not rehashing, it's proposing an alternative, which is to just define the receptacle and to include some flexibility in the definition of receptacle to include those hardwired receptacles as well. That avoids a situation where we have EV spaces that are not EV ready.
I see. I didn't understand that second part, but thank you for clarifying.
Thanks.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I know we had this discussion back and forth, and I think the clarification, there's one of the board members is a licensed electrician, knows the NEC really well. And I believe I recall the feedback, and the best I know in the NEC is a receptacle would be something that you plug into, and the junction box is just, you have the wire netted and you put the cover. I'm all for having that junction box option based on just some of the feedback been getting from the solar folks. I'm sorry, not the solar folks, the EV folks, such as Tesla.
This accommodates Tesla. You could install that hardwired Tesla equipment and this would meet it. It just avoids a situation where the legislator asked us to have EV ready spaces and just having a junction box you can't plug into. So thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Hope?
Sorry. The only thing that I'm not commenting whether it's good or bad or anything like that. The only thing I want you to keep in mind is by defining what a receptacle is, you're going to have to be very conscientious because the NEC does have a definition as far as what a receptacle is considered. And you may also have to coordinate it with how the electrical code board looks at it. So there may also have to be some coordination that will have to reside between the two entities as far as making sure that there isn't a conflict with redefining how a receptacle will be addressed here.
Thanks, Hope, for that context. Tim?
Yeah, and that's exactly my point. So when we did the chapter 1 scope and administration, we have that language just like any of the other ICC codes. When you have a conflict, well, I think this says if you have a conflict with the other codes, this code rules. But when you have a specific code requirement, which is in the NEC for definition, then I don't think you're going to have any luck going to the electrical board to get them to say.
Not asking them to change it. I'm just asking you guys to consider including a sentence that says receptacles shall include hardwired equipment to accommodate your concern that this you don't want people to have to tear out a receptacle to install that hardwired equipment. Just add a sentence that says, receptacles shall include that hardwired equipment. Don't just allow a junction box that can't be plugged into.
And I still stand on my statement, just like Hope said too, that would be in arrears with the NEC definition.
All right, and we're going to have situations where EV ready spaces are not ready.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Tim. Any final thoughts or comments before we vote on Kristen's proposed change? Zach?
Yes, as being a licensed electrician, and I do understand the NEC does have a definition for the receptacle. For me, it goes either way. And I will truly say that as long as when I think of EV ready, as long as the pipe and the wire is there, from my standpoint as an installer, I would be okay with that. But the receptacle, it does have a definition and it is specific in the NEC, and it'll always be the authority having jurisdiction. So an inspector can always shoot it down or make you put it in.
Okay, thank you so much, Zach. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and move forward with a vote. If you would like to accept the change proposed by Kristen to add a sentence to the definition of receptacle to include hardwired equipment, and then subsequently remove or junction box from the EV ready definition, please raise your hand. Okay, everyone keep your hands up, please. So make sure I capture everyone. Okay, this is a vote to accept Kristen's proposal. So we have 12 votes in favor. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. And then any board members who would like to vote against Kristen's proposal, please raise your hand now. Okay, so we have, please keep your hands up, just check in, make sure I got everyone. Okay, so I have 7 votes against, So we will, this proposed change passes, and we will do our due diligence as much as possible to make sure that they're wherever we are not in conflict with other codes and other code definitions. So hope we'll check in with you on that. Andrew.
Quick question. I know we're going to run out of time, but are we not going in order based upon chapter 1, then solar, then EV, then electric?
That was the intent. Yes, I'm not seeing.
There were no submitted changes for Solar Ready or Chapter 1. So we are, yeah.
No submitted changes?
Well, so I think there's clarification about changes that were specifically in response to public comment versus things that had not been brought up or that had been brought up before.
But Adam, I went out of my way to actually read some of the publicly submitted comments and had proposed changes in response to those. So those are all just skipped right over.
Andrew, I apologize. That was absolutely not our intent. We will, Allie, maybe I'll look to you guys to pull in Andrew's comments. I thought that they were getting pulled into the stock. So we'll make sure that those are in here, and we did not mean to skip over those. Our apologies.
Sorry, Andrew, I thought you were referring to other proposed changes. My apologies.
Okay, so we are gonna keep going, and Andrew will circle back to chapter 1 when those get included here. Proposed changes to the electric ready code. The first proposed change is from Carolyn, and Carolyn, I will pass it to you to give us your pitch.
Yeah, and we heard from a couple of the public comments around interior fireplaces. I wanted us to make a definitive decision as opposed to I'm advocating for a change necessarily. And so I just wanted, I felt like when we made the earlier amendments, we didn't explicitly state whether or not we were truly against including fireplaces. So I just wanted us to have a vote on it. Generally, I think that unless that fireplace is credited for space heating, I would not set the requirements. I don't think legislation specifies that we need to, but I just wanted us to take that definitive vote and address the comments we've received.
Thanks, Carolyn. And Adam, I believe you submitted the same proposed change. So do you want to add anything to Carolyn's comments?
No, I think I agree with Carolyn. I think there's a distinction there between interior and exterior and what they are used for. And so I think it's worth at least maybe having a discussion and a vote on to exclude exterior, but include interior in the electric ready requirements.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, the thing is skipping around a bit. Thank you, Adam. We'll go to Elizabeth and then we'll go to Ron.
Yeah, I did a little Googling on this while we were talking as well, and I didn't propose a change, but I think a clarification might be in order. If we're just changing out an interior fireplace and it's not intended to heat the space, you'll already have a receptacle close by. So, if it's just something that's to make things pretty and doesn't need to actually put out a lot of BTUs, electrical code will make you already have a receptacle within 6 feet of that fireplace. So I didn't see an additional requirement to be necessary to make it easy for a homeowner to change that out to an electric pretty version. It may though mean we want to have some clarification or distinction if it's a fireplace that's intended to provide space heating, meaning there's no other space heating provided for that space, which could occur. Okay. So sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish your comment.
So I was only going to say, if we wanted to add a clarification, instead of deleting interior and for the exception, we could just clarify that it's interior fireplaces that aren't providing space heating or are not the primary space heating source. And partly because that means a different electrical requirement, right? You know, like if we have to get a much higher heat output, we do need a different type of circuitry if it's a fireplace that's supposed to be heating the space versus if it's just ambiance.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Over to Ron.
Yeah, so along the same lines that was just mentioned, I do see fireplaces regularly where in the HERS rating, it's fireplaces are sometimes classified as decorative, and sometimes they are in fact serving space heating functions. So I think it does make sense to just try to distinguish between those two. I also think we want to be very clear that we're talking about natural gas or propane fireplaces and not wood burning fireplaces, because those also tend to have a difference in terms of how they're used.
Okay, thanks, Ron. So you'd agree with Elizabeth that keeping it as is, but adding the clarification where the fireplaces aren't the primary heating source.
Yeah, I would specifically talk about it as an exception for decorative fireplaces.
Okay. Okay. And then,
but again, we're talking about gas, not wood burning devices.
Right. Okay. Andrew.
I would agree. First, I'd prefer to keep it as is, but second, I would agree with Elizabeth. I don't like to include decorative because not primary is sufficient. And I don't know of any builder currently that considers a fireplace as primary source heating. So
I have that in my jurisdiction.
You do?
Yeah. Up in the mountains.
Andrew, in that case, would you be okay with decorative?
I don't like I think Elizabeth, how she had phrased it, I think is more appropriate. And I think it would still capture what was addressed as far as being up in the mountain. If it's primary, it's primary, but decorative and primary, decorative, I think, confuses and isn't necessary. That I thought the way Elizabeth had it was appropriate.
Interior and exterior fire pits. So would that be adding the language here that are not
Carolyn just put a little some words in the chat that could work. Interior fireplaces that do not serve as a primary source of heating.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think actually you may not have intended this, but it might make sense to have those be two things, just as you have, you know, a number one and a number two.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my proposal too. I think it gets easier so that it's any fireplace or fire pit, period, and then it's interior fireplaces that do not serve. So just is clearer.
And then is this, just reading it quickly, does this live under number 1 or number 2 here? So do not provide.
I think it was different, and I think the tab was just the formatting is wrong, but I think that's an entirely separate one.
Oh, I see. Was this?
Yeah, that's now number 3.
Gotcha. Okay, ignore the poor formatting here. Just so that it's all sort of the same. It's not working. Okay. Okay. Thank you, guys. Yes, Ron, great point. Elizabeth, yeah, anything else to add? Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I think that fits exactly what I had in mind. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Any other, I'll give everyone a moment to read. Any other thoughts or comments on this piece? Okay, I'm not hearing, yep, Tim?
And I'm not sure, I think Ron made a good point. For the mountain and maybe Western Slope, more rural areas, to clarify that the interior fireplace, I agree with the not being not serving primary source, but also to clarify that this is because, and I'm not sure if it's needed. No, I'm saying that it's based on the gas, being a gas appliance, for more clarification.
I think
I
we've already
can-
got that taken care of because
Okay.
we defined combustion equipment,
Got it. Okay, never mind.
Well, what's combustion?
not under
Um,
our definition though. I don't think.
Combustion equipment as defined per this code reads, and I can type, I'll throw it in here. So you guys can see it too. Is for, oh gosh, what happened? Any equipment or appliance used for space heating, surface water heating, cooking, clothes drying, or lighting that uses fuel gas or fuel oil. Ron, does that cover, does that, with that definition, does that ease your concern? With
I think it does.
fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So we're not covering wood stoves, pellet stoves, just really just gas and propane for the most part.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm just going to get rid of this. So I think what we'll do is vote as a group to approve this one that we workshopped, which included a couple of different board members' suggestions for this section of the code. So if board members would like to accept this change as written on the screen, please raise your hand now. Keep your hands up. Make sure we give everyone a chance. Okay, thank you all. I've got 17 votes, 18. Zach, sorry, you threw your hand up at the last minute. Was that a vote for this? Yes, okay. Okay, so 18 votes for yes. Thank you guys. You can lower your hands. And then if you do not like the change and do not want to accept the change as written on the slide, please raise your hand now. Okay, I'm seeing no hands raised, so that's 0 votes against. So this is how we will move forward with the rewrite of section CE 302.1. With that, to Ron's point, we have 5 minutes left and we do have a few things we would like to discuss, including trying to find additional time with the board to get through the remaining suggested public comment changes. Let me go ahead and just share my screen. And for those of you who have to hard drop at 2 p.m., we will try to get through this quickly. So we can incorporate the few changes that we voted on today, get that to you guys, and we can also send you all of the public comments that we received from you guys. We'll go through, clean up this document, and make sure we get it out to you guys so you have a chance to look at it. The question I'd like to pose to the board is, so I guess there might be 2 questions, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. Our original question to the board is that we thought we needed to probably extend the meeting time on Friday to accommodate more discussion and to accommodate making sure we have time to vote on all of the different code elements. And so our thinking was that we could extend that meeting by 2 hours. So moving it from 12 to 3 to 12 to 5 p.m. We want to make sure that that fits with the board's schedule. And then I also want to pose the secondary question, if the board thinks you guys need more time than that 5 hours, which given the robust discussion in this board, I might suggest is needed. We should talk about if the board wants that, and if so, we can help schedule it. Tim?
2 questions. How many more of these proposed amendments do we still have to go from the public comment part? That's number 1. And number 2, I assume you have a number of, without these amendments, that we were going to be doing a final vote on for Friday. So putting those together, how many total?
I would say, I mean, I could just do some rough math here. There's probably 30 to 4. Let's see, there's 5 there, 5, 6. I mean, I would say like 30 probably from the public comment period. The proposed changes we've covered everything else. So the only things we have left to discuss are any proposed changes that you guys have submitted today that came from public comment. So that's the point in the process that we're at. So it would just be getting through the rest of these. And I'll say right now, some of these are the same. Some of these talk to the same section. I'm sure some of you suggested the same change based on today's public comment meeting. But again, I haven't had spent time with it. So it might be faster, but it also might be 30 separate proposed changes. So first, I think let's see if folks are willing and interested and have the time to extend the meeting at least until 5 p.m. on Friday to make sure that we have time to get through everything. So if you are in support of moving forward with that, please raise your hand. And I apologize if you guys had fun weekend plans that I am cutting short or would propose to cut short here. Okay. I saw 14 hands raised. For those who did not raise their hand, do you, are there specific conflicts that are unworkable in your schedule that would prevent you guys from being able to attend? And feel free to just unmute and share those if you've got them.
No. From Zach.
I'm sorry, Zach, can you repeat what you said? I missed it.
I just said no. I mean, I can accommodate the time if I need to.
Okay, I appreciate that, Zach.
I'm in a similar boat. I'd rather not, but we have to. But I think I was just about to put this in chat. I would be interested in having in implementing a timer to make sure we stay kind of on task and move forward as quickly as we need to make sure that we actually have a chance to finish by 5 o'clock instead of pushing pretty much farther beyond that.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Rob. And we will absolutely do that, especially for the final discussion pieces. And then once we get to that final vote, there will be we'll request that the board offer up no more discussion. It will be like the thumbs up, thumbs down. Let's get the 2/3 approval for the rest once we get through these final discussion pieces. Cody?
Yeah, I'm fine moving it to Friday for 5 hours. My only concern is that we don't have ample time in between the final draft to review it. We basically create the final draft and then transition directly into voting on that final draft. That's my only concern. I think it's probably doable, but that's my biggest concern. So if there was another time tomorrow, which I know this is really difficult because we've only got 3 days left, I would prefer something in the meantime to finish these discussions, but I just don't know if there's enough time left.
Okay, thanks, Cody. Tim and then Brad.
Cody just took the words out of my mouth. And also another comment, I mean, I think we really need to do this thing justice and do the job we're doing very well at is we've got to finish these proposals and then have a chance to take a look at it in a total draft form to make sure we're not writing code that is not going to work. And then we're voting on things that were not real clear. And then my other comment is, since the next vote, which is Friday, we need a 2/3 majority, which is we've got 21 members. I don't think I've seen a vote that we're over any of the meetings we've had where I've probably seen 21 votes. So you got to have 14. So if we've got people dropping off at 4 o'clock due to other conflicts on Friday, and there may be 15 or 16 votes, now you're almost going to have to get close to 100% vote. And I don't think that that's fair for the process that we're going through.
Thanks, Tim. Brad, and I'll just ask that you guys keep your comments quick because folks have to drop off. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, just kind of Tim's point there, exactly the same thought on the majority. Friday, I have to jump off for about an hour, but can come back on, but recognizing that might complicate voting.
Thanks, Brad. Carolyn?
Yeah, I was wondering if we wanted to shoot for like a couple-hour block in the morning and then have a break where we could review the revised draft ahead of the afternoon to both accommodate what seemed to be a number of people who have to leave sometime before 5, but also to create that space, because I agree with Cody. It would be nice to see everything in its entirety. I don't think we need a ton of time, like an hour of our own time would be fine, but just making sure we are looking at it cohesively. And I also, to Rob's point, I appreciate the need to move this along, but I also think, we had a lot of people take the time today, as well as in writing to provide us public comment. And I also don't want us to rush and cut that short. They spent the time with us. I think we should spend the time with what they provided to us and not just cram it down. That didn't work well the last time we tried it. And so I just want to make sure that we're putting enough space there for that.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Kevin?
I just wonder if it's worth it to pull if there's any availability that works, even an hour or 2 hour session on Thursday in advance of that. Maybe a doodle poll and just see if there's any chance we get some time in there. It would give us a little more space. People just get burned out at 5 hours. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess what I'm hearing is that it would make the most sense to try to separate the discussion in the final vote meeting. So what I'll do, we'll follow up with the whole board by the end of today with a doodle poll asking you guys your availability for 2-hour chunks of time on Thursday and Friday. So please get back to us as soon as possible with that. And please, please, please know that you might have to be flexible in moving some of your other standing meetings. We all might have to, just to make sure we get through this week. So I'll send that out. We'll also clean up the public comments, suggestions that we got from the board, combine those, make sure that they're very clear, very easily understandable, and send those back to the board so that you guys have a chance to look at those ahead of the discussion whenever we host that Thursday. So everyone keep your calendars open. We're going to get through this. We will find the time and we will wrap up this discussion. So thanks for all of you for being here as always. And you'll hear from us via email shortly to talk about next steps. Have a great, whatever today is, Tuesday, everybody.
Thank you.